Billy Carson is known around the world as a teacher of esoteric knowledge, a researcher of ancient wisdom, and the CEO of ForbiddenKnowledge.com. He's the author of the best-selling Compendium of the Emerald Tablets and Woke Doesn't Mean Broke, and is a familiar face on Gaia TV. His research into ancient wisdom traditions makes him a sought-after speaker at summits and conferences around the world. Billy Carson, welcome to The Fifth Kind.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor to be on your show.
It's a great pleasure to have you with us. We are really only going to be able to scratch the surface of all that you're into in this conversation because you really are a Renaissance man. But I want to begin, especially for anyone who's new to your work, right at the beginning for you, and ask what it was at the outset that got you into the whole world of esoteric knowledge and ancient wisdom.
Well, for me, it goes all the way back to 1977, believe it or not. So in 1977, my family moved from New York to Miami, Florida. And so we moved in this city called Opa-locka, and there's an airport in Opa-locka called the Opa-locka Airport. It's a small private airport. And I would go out in the backyard and watch the planes go over. And so to me, it was amazing to see planes appear to be moving slow, even though I knew in my mind they had to be moving pretty fast, because how would they stay in the air? Well, this one day when I was outside doing this object came across, and it wasn't round like a flying saucer or a UFO typical shape. It was more elongated, but not like a cigar, just like a very elongated, a stretched out oval. And it was really shiny and like gleaming, what I thought at the time looked like shiny metal. I don't really know what it was. And it went across the sky. It cleared the horizon in seconds, not minutes. And right away, I was like, whoa, what did I just see? And then it came back and it stopped much lower. Maybe now I can estimate about 200 meters above my head, completely silent. And then the next thing you know, gone the way that it came back in, completely silent. And even as a kid at the age of 7, I knew it didn't have a cockpit. It didn't have a tail. It didn't have wings. It didn't have a fuselage. I knew what I saw was not an airplane. So the next day I went to the Rainbow Park Elementary School, where I was going to school 4 houses down from my house. I went straight to the library and I pulled out all the Encyclopedia Britannicas on aerospace. And I literally have started researching from 1977 to this current day. Aerospace is where I got started, looking into the original Google, the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Yes, that's right. And had anything like that happened within your family before? Were you the first in the Carson family to have a close encounter of that kind?
Wow, that's a good question. Nobody's ever asked that question. So there is a situation that did occur that I found from my aunt, who unfortunately, bless her heart, just died in 2020. She passed away from cancer. Now, my aunt was much older and lived in London, actually, most of her life. She left in her teenage years to go to London to become a TV star. She actually accomplished that. She was in James Bond. She was in some soap operas and a few other shows and movies. But she was kind of disconnected from the family on this side for quite a while. It was only see her on the holidays. She didn't have the internet. She didn't have cell phones. And right before she passed away, on her deathbed, she wanted to tell me something that was very interesting. My mom passed away 13 years prior to her. And she said that I want to tell you something about what happened with myself and your mother. When we were kids growing up in St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands, she didn't say aliens, but she said these advanced beings took us away. And, there's a place there from they were standing. It was standing at this place that has these giant, I don't know, megalithic stones or granite stones, from what I can imagine, when she was trying to explain how big these stones were. And at that location is where they were taken away for a few hours and then brought back. I found it to be pretty interesting for somebody to tell me that on their deathbed. She didn't know I was forbidden knowledge. She doesn't know anything about my TV shows, Instagram, none of that kind of stuff. And I thought that was pretty interesting for her to want to share that with me, while she's passing away.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The reason I asked that question is that a lot of people, when they come to me and report their own experiences that they're trying to process, I'll say, did your mom or dad have an experience like this? And they'll say, oh, no, I don't think so. I think they'd have told me.
Yeah.
And then about a week later, they'll call me back and say, actually, I talked to my dad. And he said, well, since you asked, son, I'll tell you what happened to me when I was 15 years old. So there's often a longer story.
Yeah.
But you mentioned that the impact for you of that experience was that it turned you really into a researcher,
hmm
and
Yeah.
you began at the technology end of the spectrum. At
hmm
some point, you have joined the dots with other fields of study and other academic disciplines,
Yeah.
and you discovered the ancient world of Mesopotamia.
Right.
Can you tell me how you discovered that tradition and how it tied in with your technological interests?
Sure, definitely. It's really it's a crazy story. So as I began to study the technology, I looked into delta wing, swept wing, ballistics. I was looking to, hypersonic, supersonic. I went to all the different aspects of aerospace that I could find. I couldn't find anything that looked like what I saw. And so, but I continued to study and research because now this whole field of aerospace had really captured my soul and my heart, and I became dedicated to it. So I kind of became a quasi aerospace historian over many years as a just growing up. I was just obsessed with it. And much later on in life, I was working on a project where I was, well, let me start first. First, I was looking out into space with my satellite, with my telescope. And with my telescope, I started researching the precession of the equinoxes. The precession of the equinoxes and the speed in which the precession moves, I realized that the 27,000 years is really more like 25,000 years, and I was trying to figure out what would cause this speeding of of precession of the movement of the stars across the constellations across the sky. And I started looking into orbital mechanics. And when I started looking into orbital mechanics, I realized in order for our sun to move faster and slower, it must be orbiting something. So I started hypothesizing that maybe we are orbiting another large rogue planet, or maybe even orbiting another star. And come to find out, our sun is actually orbiting a brown dwarf star, which is now peer-reviewed science, which is actually trying to
Yes.
change all the astrophysics books. And so that got me into that whole realm of, looking into space. And now during this process, I realized there were cataclysms that were being caused on Earth around this orbital cycle of this intertwining of the gravitational fields of the stars, creating havoc throughout the entire solar system. And so I realized, okay, let me start this project. I wanted to build an underground shelter. So I built this underground city, is what it turned out to be. It's the size of 3 Walmarts underground. It's in Northwest Georgia. I was on the History Channel because of this. This is one of the first times I made TV in 2012 because of this giant project I was working on, a $20 million project. Now, the significance of this is during the time that I was working on this project and it was getting all this notoriety around the world, uh, all of a sudden I was in my house one day after a long day's work working on this specific project, and all the lights in my family room went dim. They turned lavender. The TV I was watching went off. I was watching ESPN. I wasn't tired yet. It was only like 9 p.m. I looked over my left shoulder to see if my boys were playing a trick on me, a prank. No boys on that side, nothing going on. But when I turned my head back around, two, what I can only say to you would be the typical gray aliens right in my face, within inches of my face. And I'm sitting down in a chair much about this same height. So they must have been no more than 4 feet, 4.5 feet max. Their eyes, I still can't tell if they were really eyes or if it was some type of apparatus. It was very strange. They
Mm.
didn't give me any telepathic communication, but what happened for me, at least, was that my brain literally started shaking in my skull. I tried to scream, no sound was coming out. There were people in the house. At that time, I was actually married. My wife was home. She heard nothing. My girls on the other side heard nothing. My kids heard nothing. My boys heard nothing. And then just as fast as it started, it stopped, and they don't really have a walking gait like a human, but they kind of dangled or bounced away, and they went through the wall. The lights came back, the TV came back, and I was completely shocked. I was torn up. It scared the heck out of my family. It took years for me to start talking about this because it was actually one of the catalysts for my divorce. So I gained nothing out of this,
Mm.
and I sought no popularity from it either. But that interesting event did something special. How I got into ancient civilizations. After this happened, the phrase worldwide telescope was burnt into my brain. It just kept playing over and over and over and over again. Worldwide telescope, nonstop, to the point where it was like hundreds of times. I went to my computer, and back then Google was just competing still with all the other search engines. So I went to excite.com and I typed in worldwide telescope. It's still in business till this very day. Worldwidetelescope.org is the first thing that popped up on the search result. I almost fell out of my chair. I click on it, takes me to a website where I can access all the space probe data from all the missions ever sent into space. And the first one I see is, I say, okay, let me click on Mars. And then I go, oh, panoramas, let me click on that. And then it gave me Spirit rover, it gave me Opportunity rover, and it gave me all these different areas that the rovers were in. So I clicked on Opportunity, and I go in there and I'm looking around. I'm in McMurdo Valley and these other, and I start seeing anomalies, things that don't appear to be like they don't appear to be rocks, and they shouldn't be where they were. And that's what got me into anomaly hunting. But the things I saw looked like things from ancient civilizations on Earth. And I'm like, wait a minute, whoa, is this real? And the more I researched, I found out it was real. And these images weren't obfuscated and still aren't obfuscated yet on that particular access to the space probe data. And so I started making a correlation between ancient civilizations and these space anomalies. And I started hypothesizing, could these Anunnaki beings or these Atlantean people have been an interplanetary civilization? And could they be connected? And that's what I came to find out. My total hypothesis is that, yes, they are the same people. Yes, they are connected. And yes, they were on different planets and moons in this solar system.
Wow, there's so much in your answer there. I want to flag one thing you mentioned in passing, that experiencing a close encounter, as you described there, a close encounter of the fourth kind, is a very isolating experience.
Yeah.
It doesn't help anyone to have an
No.
experience like that. It doesn't give you an advantage to get a better job or improve your relationships, quite the reverse.
Yeah.
So I thank you for mentioning that part of the story.
Yeah.
You were well ahead of the curve in terms of recognizing these anomalies in the images from Mars. Everyone's talking about it now. What are we
Yeah.
seeing on the surface now? And beginning to talk about how it relates to previous civilizations. What was it that you found in the ancient cuneiforms that told you that what you were reading about there had a relationship with what you were seeing on the surface of Mars?
Yeah, so a great question. I started looking into the Sumerian Tablets. Originally, I came across the work of Zechariah Sitchin, which before he was being ridiculed and everything else. And I realized that he was giving the location of his sources for where he got his ideas. People think that he made all this stuff up. No, he was using source material. And I found that he was using material that was already translated long before he was born. I said, holy crap, this stuff is not what people think. You got to read these tablets. So I said, how can I find these tablets? I got into the Enuma Elish and the 7 tablets of creation, and I also got into the Epic of Atrahasis. Both of them tell an incredible tale of the creation of the solar system, as well as the explosion of Tiamat, how Earth was formed from the remnants of Tiamat, how the asteroid belt formed, and also how there were beings that came to this solar system after it kind of healed and recoalesced. They created a breakaway civilization on Earth, and they also had a civilization running concurrently on Mars. And the people that were working these breakaway civilizations, doing the harder labor, were the working class Anunnaki people. They call them the Igigi in the Sumerian cuneiform tablets, the Igigi. And these people were doing the work and the labor, and they were coming back and forth to and fro from Earth to Mars on a consistent basis.
The point you made there that I think is really important is that Zechariah Sitchin was working off translations that were widely accepted concerning the meaning of the ancient cuneiforms. As you say, it wasn't Sitchin who was creating this interplanetary storyline.
Right.
It was there in the tablets. So how do you think it is that that information had lain dormant for so long until Zechariah Sitchin came along and said, hey, everybody, do you realize what this means?
Yeah, you know what happened was the story is so incredible and so mind-blowing. The average person can't wrap their mind around a civilization that could be potentially 1 million years ahead of us technologically, but that occurred, hundreds of thousands of years ago. So it's hard for us because we're human beings are such egotistical beings. It's hard to wrap our mind around that. So the tablets kind of just fell to the wayside. They really weren't oppressed or suppressed in any kind of heavy way, to be honest with you. As a matter of fact, I think that a lot of Hollywood producers had gotten their hands on some of these tablets and started utilizing them to create things like Star Wars and Star Trek and all these other star and space type films, taking pieces of them and adding their own creativity to it to create their own masterpieces out of them. And it's like, look, nobody's reading these tablets. We'll use this to make these great movies. And it worked. And then all of a sudden, Zechariah Sitchin he stumbles across a few of these tablets and starts realizing, wow, there's a lot here. And he reawakened everyone to the fact that these tablets are real, they exist, and they're fully accessible. Matter of fact, the entire cuneiform library is available on UCLA, the UCLA CDLI Cuneiform Online Digital Library, when anybody can go there for free, grab a stone off the shelf, and drop it right into a translator digitally and decode it and read it for themselves.
We had to know something at theological college when I was training to be a minister about the Mesopotamian literature, because it's pretty clear that they are the source documents for the stories we're familiar with in the Bible. And I found what happened to us is that this was sort of noted, and then you're handed your list of essays to write for your degree, and you pick a different topic.
Yeah.
And you never go back to the implications of, hold on, what does it mean that many of our God stories are based on stories of ET contact?
Right.
And it really was, for me, just a matter of time, of joining the dots, having the time to go back and say, wait a minute, what does that mean?